Доброе утро. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. So we're going to talk about velocity to value. Before we jump in, just a quick check to give me a sense of who is who in the audience. So raise your hand if you are in the business function, meaning you are an owner of a business, you are in business school, you run a sales function, a marketing function, a product function, you're not writing code every day. Okay, good. And raise your hand if you're actually an engineer and you're writing code. Okay, about half and half, nice. So the main talk is really about how data science can help accelerate the pace of innovation. So a little bit about, okay, what we'll do. So maybe 1 minute on who is PA Consulting and why we do what we do. Here I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. Raise your hand if you've heard of who Simon Sinek is. Okay, 2, 3 people. So Simon Sinek is a pretty famous business strategist, and he's written a book called Start With Why. And one of the concepts he came up with is the golden circle, which is the why, how, and what. And when you do anything in life, he posits that first you should ask, why do you do it? Then how do you do it? And then what do you do? So the structure of the talk is really in the golden circle of Simon Sinek. So that's the journey today. So by the way, feel free to interrupt. Raise your hand if you want to ask me a question. We don't have to wait for questions till the end. Let me just check that the clicker is working. So PA Consulting, very quickly, the company is about really innovation, and the logo is bringing ingenuity to life. So the entire company is really focused on how to make innovation happen, and it's a global consultancy that does the traditional consulting, but also makes product and services. So a little bit more about it. I guess one of the most interesting things is it's been around for a long time. It started out actually as a company where women were making fuselages for bombs during World War II for the British government. So, and now it's a global consultancy of about almost 3,000 people working across all sectors with 20+ offices worldwide. A little bit about who our clients are. So traditional big companies, startups, we form a lot of ventures, and we also work with private equity. So if you're in the audience and you are a startup, it could be interesting for us to talk about partnerships. We're also owned by a private equity group, the Carlyle Group, and in the last year and a half, we've bought 4 companies. So if you're looking for a global European consultancy to buy your company or buy a company that you're working for, come and talk to me afterwards. And then lastly, we actually build stuff. So the company has built actually the shell for this iRobot and the app that connects to the shell. Here, this is a device that veterinarians use to actually diagnose blood of animals, what they take samples from. And here, you insert the slide, and instead of sending information to the lab, you actually get a readout on any particular disease. And then lastly, this is what my team does. I run the data science practice, and we really focus on machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing. So let's jump into the meat of the conversation. So raise your hand if you know who this is. Please, the lady right there. Но это не Хемингуэй в грубом свитере, а кто-то из бизнеса. Any idea? So this is Peter Drucker. Raise your hand if you know who Peter Drucker is. Yes? Yeah, so he is the father of management, and he was a professor at NYU for more than 20 years, originally from Germany, and he's considered really the father of modern business management. So he actually brought management into the conversation as not just something that people talk about, but it's actually a rigorous science. So And he had a quote about the purpose of a business. So the purpose of the business is to do what? Yell it out. Raise your hand or don't raise your hand. What do we got? Yeah, please. Okay, make money. Anybody else? That's not it. Yes, please. Okay. That seems to be recursive. You're probably an engineer. Okay. Yeah. What is that? Add value. Okay. Cool. So Peter Drucker said that the purpose of a business is to create a customer, which is pretty cool. And if you think about what businesses are about today, it's all creating customers. And now the businesses are more and more worried about consumers. And Peter also said that the business has two and only two functions. Everything else is a cost center. Take a guess at what that is. What are the two functions of a business? What do you need to do to create a customer? Yeah? Find the need and fulfill the need. How do you, okay, that's pretty good. Anybody else? So you're almost there. So Peter said that the two functions of a business are innovation, right? That's really finding a need and fulfilling a need, both of those things, right? And then he has one other function. So if you find a need and you fulfill it, what else do you need to do to create a customer? You have to tell them about it, right? So the second function of a business is marketing. So he posits that there's really two things that a business does. It innovates and it markets, and that's it. So the idea is, now we're talking about innovation. Innovation is important, right? That's the why. And I want to talk about why it's hard. So raise your hand if you know who this is. Yeah, okay. Again. Yes, Ray Kurzweil. And so who is Ray Kurzweil? Yeah, you got it. I think you hacked my computer, must have been, right? You got both of the answers. So Ray Kurzweil is a computer science professor at NYU. He's a futurist, he's a visionary. He's written about 7 books. Peter Drucker wrote about 50, but he has had a lot more time to write. And Ray is still alive. He's trying to be alive for a long time. He takes about 100 pills a day, and he's trying to live forever. So he's a very interesting guy. And he had a notion that he talked about innovation, right? He said that basically the future is, it's not really linear, right? And our intuition about future is linear, but really growth, innovation, and progress, and the nature of human progress is actually exponential. So, and I won't belabor you guys with what exponential means, because I assume that most of you know. So this is where we are today. So Ray had this interesting idea. He said, imagine what would happen if you took a guy from 1700s and you brought him to today. So what do you think would happen if you invented this time machine? Nothing? So he says that he would die, or she would die. The person would die because of the amazing progress that they would see, right? They would see the Tesla cars, and they would see planes, and they would see computers, and they would be overwhelmed with emotion, and they would die. And so Ray calls this the Die Progress Unit, DPU. So now there's a question. We moved about, 300 years? What happens if you move 300 years back from 1700, right? Now you go to 1400, you bring the guy to 1700. What do you think would happen? Yeah, so he'll be famous, he'll know the future, but before he does all of this, what would be his emotional reaction between 1400 and 1700? Yeah, it's about the same. So what really happened? I mean, so a lot of things happened geopolitically, like Bogdan Khmelnytsky happened, and lots of margins around Europe changed, right? But really, in terms of technology and technology innovation, right, not much happened in 300 years. So now the question is, how far back do you have to go to actually get to the same die progress unit, DPU? So here we jumped from 1700 to today. We died. How far back do you have to go to die again? 400. Anybody else? 100. 100 years back. Okay. I'm asking back before I ask forward. That's a good point. Forward. Forward will come. How far back from 1700? So about 12,000. If you go one more time, this is Prometheus with fire. This is men hunting. And so somebody asked how far forward do you have to go to get to the same result? So 100 years, any other guesses? Yeah. About 15 years, right? It's pretty cool. So anyways, the point of this is innovation is happening and it's insane, right? The growth is exponential. And this is, Ray calls this the law of accelerating returns. So this is us, and this is what's about to happen. So now we know innovation is important. Peter Drucker said it. Ray said, okay, it's insanely fast. So why is it hard? It's hard, especially when it comes to data, because companies are struggling with these things, right? They're struggling with talent. They're struggling with the evolving expertise. They're struggling with the speed to market. They're struggling with all of these notions. They're struggling with enterprise architecture, right? Because once you actually develop a product, you have a proof of concept. Now you have to integrate it with your system. It's complicated. And this is why it's hard. So what do you do? And so we covered the why. So how do you deal with this? And basically, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about you can basically solve this problem either by buying a solution, a service, or product, or by building it yourself. So again, if you are a business owner and you're thinking about this, think about it from the point of view of you're running a company, and a Fortune 100 company may be looking to buy a product from you. If you're an engineer, you're thinking about, what do I need to do to work for a company that's actually building solutions versus a company that's going to be providing a solution. So first, the buy option. The buy option basically comes in two flavors. If you want a solution, and you're a Fortune 500 company, and you want to buy the solution, so there are thousands of machine learning companies out there, some products, some services, and you can buy them here. You can buy the solution that they provide, or you can buy a solution from basically the two biggest cloud architectures out there, right? Microsoft Azure and AWS. And both of these guys claim to do a lot of what the machine learning startups are doing. And there's a lot of argument in the market about, well, if you want something very specific, how good can the Azure machine learning environment be? Especially if you want to get really, really granular in a particular product. And so that's the landscape. So what are the positives and negatives of actually buying a product? So the positives are you can do it fast, right? You come in, you buy a solution from a vendor, they plug it in, and it's working. So that's a really, really positive value you get. They come with existing libraries that they've built, and you get to tap into those libraries. They build a solution which actually is built on the data of your competitors, and that's very powerful. So you're not only leveraging your company's data, but you're actually learning from the data of the competitors. And of course, it's really tailored to your industry, and that's what each one of these product companies will set up, right? So one of the products we started using recently at PA Consulting is a company that actually does natural language processing on legal data and actually finds potential value that you lose in contracts. Very, very specific product, using very specific libraries around legal and doing NLP on legal documents. So that's a company here. Probably Azure or AWS doesn't really have an environment that's similar to that. That's a product that's like that. Now, what are the cons? The cons of buying is the IP is not yours, right? And you don't have price control. So the price function when you buy a product will look like something like this. It's flat. You're going to pay a fee, and then the rates are going to go up. The rates are going to go up. Rates are going to go up. So you don't have control over IP. You don't have control over the rates, and the company can basically disappear, right? If it's a startup, it can disappear because it goes bankrupt. It can also disappear because a competitor will buy them. And neither of those are particularly good options if you're a Fortune 100 company, so you have a dependence. So this is a way to think about the buy solution. So the second option is the build solution. So the build solution is interesting because, first of all, the cost function is quite different, right? The cost function is, first, it's quite high, right? Because you're going to have to hire people, and they're going to have to build a solution. And then it actually drops significantly, right? Now you've built it, and all you have to do is maintain it. There are two basic options to build it. You can build it yourself. That's the IT department, right? Keep calm and turn off and turn on again. And there are partners. In the partner landscape, there are basically 5 options. So first, there are strategy firms. And this is how Fortune 100 companies think about this landscape. The strategy firms will tell you how to do it, but they won't do it for you. They'll tell you to hire somebody else. There are IT players, so this is Accenture and IBM, very traditional, big ones. There are design houses like BBDO and IDEO. They will describe to you what the user experience should be, but they probably are going to struggle in building the solution, end to end. There are big 4 firms that you all have heard of: Deloitte, Ernst & Young, PwC, KPMG, which will actually do everything for you. And then, of course, there are a few others. So here I put in a category for us, for Altexsoft, and that means that we don't fit into any of these categories. And I think this is a hugely growing category. I think there are probably a couple of companies even here that fit into this model. The way that we propose to actually run this and do innovation is through a hybrid approach. So the approach of strategy firms is to do this top-down. They do a 2-month engagement. They tell you exactly what your company's organization should look like, how they should innovate, how all of this works. The complete opposite end, which is often done with an offshore player, is to do this bottom-up, right? So the bottom-up play is you come in and you build a proof of concept, you build a prototype, and you see where it lands. So the problem here is you have the organizational buy-in, but you actually don't have anything that you've implemented. The problem with bottom-up is you've implemented something, but you don't have the organizational buy-in. You don't know how it's going to fit with the IT architecture. You don't have business champions set up. So we found that both of these approaches have drawbacks. So the approach that we've used is this hybrid approach, which says, do a 1 or 2 year roadmap, and then in parallel build a prototype. And those two things combined actually create the most value. And that's what we've been doing with a lot of our clients. And that's the approach that more and more companies are taking: a reduced roadmap and a prototype. So that's the how. Now the what. What are we building? So a couple of very quick concepts here. First of all, there's a notion of a prototype. So how do you get to a prototype? You need a use case. So this is a template of a use case, and the point where most of our clients struggle is basically filling out this template. So believe it or not, it looks simple, right? So identify the problem, identify the sponsor, identify criteria for success, really, really basic stuff. So the amazing part is most clients struggle to actually get this done. So usually for us, a use case discussion starts with a conversation that will actually get you to fill out a template like this, and it will get a client and a business sponsor to say, this is what the actual problem is. So then we prioritize this, right? We put it on a map. We already know that there were data issues and IT issues. We know that there's a business value, and we map the problems on the scale. And so from here, we can actually have a conversation that goes back to us running the prototype, and goes back to here. Okay, what's the quick win that we're actually going to implement to solve? So that's the what. So I didn't ask people about Bezos because I just assumed that everyone knows who Jeff Bezos is. But this is the famous two-pizza rule. So who should do this? And the best idea is to do this with a small team. And the reason is to really reduce communication. So this is a complete graph on 10 nodes called a K10. Anybody know how many edges a K10 will have? This is probably more than 10 edges. So 10 vertices. So we'll have 10 choose 2 edges. That's 45 edges. So the idea of this and why Bezos talks about the two-pizza rule is you have 10 people. There are 45 different conversations that could happen between any of them. And if you consider conversations that are not just between 2 people, then there's 2 to the 10 possible conversations. And that's 1,000 possible combinations, right? So that's the small team. So what does this team look like? In our case, usually the team is 3 or 4 people. Someone who's actually going to be a pod leader, a product leader, someone who's actually going to be a domain SME who understands the business. So if you're working for a pharma company, it's someone who's actually an expert in life sciences and pharmacology, right? A data scientist, that's the person responsible for the math, and a architect engineer, and that's the person who's actually going to do a lot of data architecture, a lot of ETL, and then also be the person who optimize and scale the solution when you're ready to do that. So increasingly, companies are beginning to talk about different types of data scientists. So I thought it's relevant to distinguish between them. And so if you're an engineer, you might want to consider which area do you fit best in. So the 3 that I've encountered the most, and now it's becoming a lingua franca of all of our companies referring to data scientists, is the citizen data scientist, right? That's someone with a business degree usually, not a lot of coding experience, who will mostly work within abstracted modules, right? So use a product to do development, but not really write code. Applied data scientists, which is most of the people on my team are applied data scientists, and those are people usually with more advanced degrees with technical training, but they're not really doing pure algorithm development. They're not doing R&D. And then, of course, research data scientists, and these are folks working for Google, really, Facebook, Amazon, and really they're developing new algorithms that don't exist today. So that's the why, how, what, and who of data-led innovation. So the last point is really about some of the trends. So I thought I'd pick out 5 to mention quickly here. So one of the first trends is the consumer focus and what I call the death of B2B. So probably the best example of that is consider a company like GE Healthcare. So what do you think the mission of GE Healthcare is? It's a big healthcare company that sells machines to hospitals and university centers. One more time? Okay, come to each household, yeah? Okay, private sensors to monitor patients. Anybody else? Personal healthcare devices. Okay, close. So the mission is for GE Healthcare is to improve patient outcomes. So the revolutionary thing about that is that you would think that the mission would be help hospitals make more money using best machines in the market, right? But the mission has changed. The mission now is a B2C mission, a business to consumer mission. The mission is about the consumer, and that's a huge trend. And so what that means is if you're working for a Fortune 100 company, what you want to do is come to them and have a conversation, not about their customer necessarily. So in case of G Healthcare, the customer is a hospital, but actually about the consumer. Because the mission of the company has changed to be one of improving patient outcomes, right? So basically, there are no B2B companies anymore. Every company thinks about their customer's customer and their customer's customer's customer. So at the end, you'll always get to a consumer, right? So that's trend number one. The second one is a huge shift where it used to be that analytics work was really built and bought by IT departments. And now, increasingly, it's the digital organization and the actual businesses that are buying analytics works from partners and vendors and actually building them themselves. So you'll see a lot of organizations where the analytics team is inside the digital team or inside one of the business units. The third category is actually what you see upstairs when you talk to all these vendors, right? There's no more service companies and product companies per se. You see the space collapsing, right? Because product companies are realizing that customers want configurable solutions. They don't want generic products. So they have to figure out how to stay in a high-margin, scalable game, but actually provide a unique configurable solution that's relevant to me as a customer. Service companies are struggling because customers don't want to just pay money to have a solution built over a longer period of time. They want something that's fast, that can be fit to their data, their customers, and they want it implemented quickly, and they want to own the IP. And so those two categories are merging and really collapsing on each other. So you'll see a lot of big consultancies like Deloitte or PwC or Accenture buying a lot of product companies, which is why my company, BA Consulting, is buying a lot of product companies as well. So the fourth trend is value-based pricing. So now a lot of the products that we sell are no longer traditional. Here's a 3 months engagement, here's time and material, or here's fixed price cost for it. It's all about, well, we think that we will improve your marketing ROI by 20%, and that translates into $50 million a year, and we would like to take 1% of that. And that's how we're beginning more and more to price projects. So that's a growing trend in consulting. So if you're running a company or you're running business development and sales and marketing for a company, you might want to consider an innovative way to actually price your product or service. So last point is that increasingly companies, especially large consulting companies, are beginning to offer different types of services, which not only include the company itself, building something, but actually brings in the entire ecosystem. So a lot of the consulting firms are forming partnerships with product players. And so one of the things to consider is how do you want to partner with large consultancies if you're running a product company. And increasingly in the marketplace, we come to clients with our partners. That's the ecosystem. So that's the last trend. And I think we have maybe a few minutes for questions if you guys have any. But that's all I got. Yeah. So, questions?
Спасибо большое за выступление. У нас также есть вопросы с телеграм-чат-бота. Давайте начнем с них, наверное.
Okay.
Можно просто на экран вывести.
Okay, how to make data science a sexy function in a business where main value lies in something else? Is it okay to ask who asked the question? Or is it someone virtual? Anybody want to own the question? I want to have a conversation. If not, I'll just answer it. Yes, you're Tim? Uh-huh. Ray Kurzweil, yeah.
So I just mentioned that you got the first exponential curve of innovation from Team Urban Block, which is weight by Y.
Okay.
And my question was how to make data science a sexual function in a business where main value lies in something else, completely different.
So, is that an assumption that the value lies in something else that's completely different?
No. That's reality, harm reality. For example, you are working for grocery retail.
Okay.
And all money comes from the shops. And usually the business owners see you as a cost, not as a revenue stream. So how can you make data science something sexy, something independent in a business when all the money came from the other source?
So, at the end of the day, in my experience, usually you become sexy when you start making money in business, in life too sometimes. So, the question then the data scientist should ask is, how do you make money for the business, right? That's what makes you sexy. So the business usually doesn't care if you're using Python or using R, you're using Scala, if you're using a package or you develop this yourself. What they care about is, how will you make me money tomorrow? And what do I need to give you for you to make this money for me, right? So there is a cost function, but if you don't want to be associated with a cost function, right? That's the IT department. IT is cost, right? If you want to move towards innovation and marketing, right, the two main functions of a business, right, innovation and marketing, you want to start having a conversation with the business about what's going to help them make more money. So I guess if I deconstruct that, right, one is you want to have a relationship with the business. Most of the companies where we work with the IT department, the IT folks and the data scientists within the IT function actually have no relationship with the business. They don't have a weekly call. They don't have a structured engagement conversation. So the way I do this, right, in my company, I run the data science function. But my business owners are the people who are running sectors. So I have someone who runs our life sciences practice. I have someone who runs our energy practice, someone who runs the utilities practice, someone who runs the consumer goods practice. So my job is not to talk to them about, hey, we have NLP, hey, we have computer vision. That's nice. My job is to tell them, let's work on a use case, right? The template that I was showing earlier. And so the conversation goes like this. They come to me and says, Alex, what can you do in healthcare? And I said, well, let's talk about that. And then they'll say, well, we have a problem with hospital readmissions. And I asked them, what does hospital readmissions mean? Well, it means that people come to a hospital, they get cured, they leave, and then they come back again a week later with the same problem. That's called a readmission. And it's a problem for the health insurance companies because they have to pay the hospital for the treatment of the patient, but they really shouldn't because the patient wasn't treated appropriately the first time. So he's readmitted with the same problem. So how do you solve this? So if you leave the problem that is open-ended like this, there's not much I can do because it's kind of like solving world hunger. So we then have a conversation that zooms in on this topic, right? So I will say, and this is actually a conversation I'm having with a healthcare team. I say, okay, well, I can't solve world hunger. I can't solve readmission. But can we narrow down the problem where I can understand the problem that's well-defined and I can find the data? So that what we got to was, well, let's take readmission and let's look at what happens in New York, geography, well-defined, and let's look at what happens in the summer and in the winter. In the winter, it's really cold in Kiev and in New York. So what happens is that people come to the hospital, to the emergency room, just to get warm. In the summer, it's really, really hot. And people come to the emergency room, people, mostly homeless people, come there to really just cool off. So basically, you have an implosion of emergency room readmissions, mostly driven by people homeless who want to cool off or warm up, right? So now I have a well-defined problem in the geography. By the way, I have tons of weather data that's free online that I can do right get. And I have admissions data because we have New York hospitals who are our clients. So now I have a well-defined use case, and I can say, look, if I can reduce readmission by 5%, what is that worth to you? That's very easy problem to solve, right? We can estimate that back on the envelope. And now I have a solution. I'm really sexy now because I've solved a problem that actually gives money to the hospital. So anyways, this is really what we're doing right now. And you just have this conversation with whatever function that you're in, and that's usually how I've gotten to value. Long answer, I think, to your question. Do we have time for one more?
Да, у нас есть еще пару минуточек. Кто еще желает задать вопрос из зала? Поднимайте ручку, буду к вам подходить. Что, нет вопросов совсем? Хорошо, давайте тогда поблагодарим Алекса за прекрасное
Спасибо.
выступление.